testifying. Never mind. That's good. We're good.
So we're hearing about VOREC this morning, which stands for, somebody help me, fill me in.
So it stands for the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative.
Economic Collaborative. Okay, great. And it's in the context of the recreation bills, plural. And just for a little bit of background, it seemed like it might be helpful to get a little bit of the tutorial on VOREC, and we're going to hear that this morning. Maybe we should do a quick introduction, since I don't know if you know everyone. Okay. Well, we met a few minutes ago. David Durfee. I represent Shaftesbury and Glastonbury and Sunderland and Bennington County. Go around.
Rodney Graham, I represent Orange 3, which is Williamstown and Chelsea.
Jed Lipsky, represent Lamoille 1, Stowe.
Henry Pearl, towns of Danville, Peacham, and County.
I'm David Templeman, introduced earlier, Brownington, Barton, and Westmore.
Mike Rice, Bennington, Rutland, District, Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
That's for real for this number.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, Hartford.
Heather Supernat, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
And we have Alora Rich, our community assistant, is working remotely today, so she's handling everything. And so far, Alora, thank you for getting us started.
Is Josie on?
Josie's not. I think she, as far as I know, Representative Levitt?
Has a doctor's appointment.
Okay. All right. And Representative Wilson also, I think, had an appointment. So we have Jackie Dagger, who is the program manager. Now I see I've got it spelled out in my agenda for VOREC. And Rebecca, which do you prefer to go by? Becca. Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, Becca Washburn, who's Director of Lands Administration and Recreation with the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. And you have a presentation that you want to start with?
I do, yeah. Should I just go ahead and share my screen?
Yeah, feel free to share your screen if you want. If you've sent it to Alora, it will be posted on our committee page if it's not already.
Chair, will that appear on the
I
screen?
think in a moment, yeah.
Okay. So let me see here. Is that showing right? Yeah, there we go. Great. Well, thank you guys for having us in. I just wanted to start by introducing myself. So again, for the record, my name is Jackie Dagger. I'm the program manager for the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, or VOREC for short. It's a mouthful. And you can see some more information about me up on the screen. I work between the the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And I wanted to just give you a little background on myself because it's very connected to the VOREC program and the work that we do. I'm an avid outdoor recreationist. I'm also a gardener, and I am from Vermont. I grew up in Woodstock, Vermont. And I've been working both professionally and personally in the outdoor recreation space, both in Vermont and Washington. And I couldn't resist letting you all know that my background is in food systems and permaculture design. So it feels like full circle coming here and being here with you this morning. So I also want to note, before I dive in, a thank you to Chair Durfee for having us this morning and the rest of you for your interest in the VOREC program. Becca Washburn is also here with me. She'll be speaking in a little bit. She's the director of the Division of Lands Administration and Recreation for FPR, and I'll turn it over to her to introduce herself later on. And through our testimony today, our goal is to help provide you with a solid overview of the VOREC program and the work we're doing with our partners to support and strengthen the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont. So I know Becca will also be back, as you mentioned, Chair Durfee, next week to talk more specifically about H467 and the other recreation bills. So we're just trying to give you a little context and background today. And to understand the VORIC program, it's important to understand the full scope of what's considered within the outdoor recreation economy. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take a brief moment to build a baseline with you all this morning for what that includes and how we define the outdoor recreation economy sector. So outdoor recreation touches many aspects of economy and community life. It includes not only the activities we participate in, like hiking the Long Trail, strolling in a state park, or skiing in one of Vermont's world-class ski resorts, but it's also the businesses we visit, the products we use to go outside, the people we meet and bring with us, and the health and wellness benefits we experience from going outside. So in the photo up on the screen, you see a number of things that reflect this. You see a group of people gathering to go rock climbing on Lake Champlain in the city of Burlington. While they climb, they're connecting with a very unique natural feature to the city of Burlington and learning about the environment locally there. In the photo, you can also see that this group is carrying things like backpacks and helmets and rock climbing shoes. So we know that they visited a retail business to purchase those items. Furthermore, it's likely this group burned a lot of energy while rock climbing because it's a very active sport. And they might have gone to a business before they got to this spot to buy some snacks, or they might have gone together to get lunch after they were done with climbing. So you see how the outdoor recreation, the active outdoor recreation interplays with local communities, businesses, towns. Great. So if we synthesize down and look at the core of the outdoor recreation economy, we really see that it's this interplay between land, water, air, and wildlife and the economy at its core. We also see that it overlaps with many other areas of economy, so the private sector industry, public sector organizations, and nonprofit sector organizations. So going back to that photo that I showed you before, I can give you a little bit more information about how that photo came to be. So it was taken during a workshop that was organized through a partnership between the Vermont Department of Tourism, the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, my program, and the nonprofit organization Powered Magazine, who then partnered with a private business, Petroglyphs, to provide participants with an introduction to rock climbing. So you start to see how all of these different organizations and state agencies interact with each other. A little bit more about the area around where that climbing destination is. So it's managed by a nonprofit organization called Rock Point on the lands of an Episcopal church. And the land has been conserved as the result of a partnership between a coalition of partners that include the church, the city of Burlington, the Lake Champlain Land Trust, and the Park Foundation of Burlington. Federal dollars were also granted through the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation to build out the accessible trails in that area. That a local business, Timber and Stone, was employed to build those trails. So you get my point. There are lots of layers to the outdoor recreation economy and how all of these different aspects of sectors work together to support a thriving outdoor recreation economy. Looking at this through just one additional lens, you start to see the benefits of the outdoor recreation economy and a thriving outdoor recreation sector. I won't spend too long here, but this graphic was developed by a consulting company called Headwaters Economics. It shows the broad benefits of the outdoor recreation sector. So you see things that I've already mentioned, tourism, Main Street businesses, and you also start to see things like new residents and tax revenue coming in. And so if you think back to that photo and imagine if you're someone coming to visit Rock Park and you're going rock climbing there, you're seeing the benefits that the city of Burlington has for getting outside, you might choose to move there. And furthermore, if you're an entrepreneur, you might think, why not set up a business that helps people get out and experience rock climbing? Or you might say, I want to build a product that helps people have a better experience in the outdoors. So you see how these things start to build through a thriving outdoor recreation economy. I won't spend long here because I know you've seen these numbers before and had Nick Bennett come in and give you an overview of what the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont looks like. But now that we have a shared definition, I just want to reflect and look back on really the world-class outdoor recreation opportunities that Vermont has. And I think these numbers reflect that really well. I know Nick also shared with you a little bit about the impact of the outdoor recreation economy for Vermont, that its impact is 4.1% of our GDP, which is the third highest in the country behind Montana and Hawaii. That's pretty cool for such a small state. I also wanted to reflect that it includes 14,582 jobs, which make up 4.7% of employment here. In 2021, while other sectors of Vermont's economy were struggling, jobs in the outdoor recreation center were growing by 17.6%, reflecting the resiliency of our outdoor retailers and brands. In 2017, Governor Scott recognized the importance of outdoor recreation to Vermont's economy. He also recognized the complexity and scope of outdoor recreation, a lot of the things that I was just talking about, and its diverse stakeholders and needs. So to organize outdoor recreation partners and work on large-scale efforts, Governor Scott signed Executive Order 1117, establishing the VOREC program. And you can see a little bit more detail under, the things that I was talking about earlier under land, water, air, and wildlife and economy up on the slide.
I'm sorry, what year was that, Jack?
That was 2017.
2017.
Yeah.
And the number of that executive order?
It was 1117. Yeah. And please feel free to jump in with questions. I know I'm sort of rolling through this.
Okay, thanks.
So to organize these outdoor recreation partners, we established Executive Order 1117. So the VOREC program is actually part of a national effort to establish offices of outdoor recreation. They're also known as ORECs for short, but they serve as central champions for outdoor recreation economy. To date, 18 states have created these offices of outdoor recreation, and Vermont was actually the first in the East to join this national collaboration. So we're really leading the way and setting a framework for how other states think about outdoor recreation economy and this work, which is pretty neat. VOREC, the program, so we have a working mission statement up on this slide, but we're pretty unique among other offices of outdoor recreation in that we're organized as a collective impact network. So the network is managed primarily through the state, through the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and works through public and private partners to move forward landscape scale efforts that advance 5 pillars of work. And I think Nick also might have shared these with you the other day. But these pillars really reflect the scaffolding of how VOREC and our partners are intending to strengthen the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont. So just to review them really quick because they are so important, they are to grow outdoor recreation related businesses, increase participation in outdoor recreation activities among all demographics, strengthen the quality and extent of outdoor recreation resources, increase stewardship of outdoor recreation resources and environmental quality, and promote and enjoy the health and wellness benefits of outdoor recreation. So these pillars came from Vermonters. They're originating from a 2-day conference held in Grafton, Vermont in August of 2017, and they were refined through a series of 7 community conversations that were held across the state. These events drew representatives from Vermont businesses and nonprofits, including outdoor manufacturers, retailers, and brand representatives, trail users and user groups, and conservation organizations, as well as state government, who work together on developing recommendations and measurable outcomes for leveraging outdoor recreation resources and driving economic development in Vermont's economy as a whole. So as a relatively young program, we have been working over the past several years to understand the ecosystem of the outdoor recreation economy here in our state and what our and how to work with our partners, who our partners are. We've accomplished some big things since we've been working on developing our structure. And this includes laying the groundwork for establishing the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, which has become a really important convener of Vermont outdoor businesses and a source for workforce development. We also, as you know, have the VOREC Community Grant Program, which has granted over $4.5 million to communities across Vermont. They're actually shown on the map up on the screen. So almost every county has received almost every county has received a VOREC Community Grant. And we also, during the pandemic, worked to establish guidance on how to recreate outside safely, which was really important just to organize folks statewide during that time of a lot of confusion.
You may get to this. Can you tell us what kinds of organizations typically get grants?
Yeah, definitely. So municipalities and nonprofit organizations are eligible to apply to the grant program. We just opened it up during our last grant round to nonprofit organizations, and that was because we learned through the first couple rounds of the program that nonprofits are really important to extending the capacity of municipalities for completing outdoor recreation projects. So usually those nonprofit organizations are focused on outdoor recreation themes. You know, they want to help municipalities develop a trail system or provide a program, those kinds of things. And then municipalities obviously are really interested in developing their trail systems or building a marketing plan to welcome new visitors to their area. So we grant for all kinds of activities.
Are the nonprofits some of the associations, trail associations, or would they be other groups? For the from the nonprofit side, I'm trying to think of some good examples because we did. So the Trust for Public Lands was a recipient during the last round of our grant program, and they're working with the town of Walcott. And so that's a good example of that relationship. So they're working on developing outdoor recreation programming in the town of Walcott, helping them develop a town forest system there, bringing a school to that town forest for more educational purposes. Is that good? Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Representative O'Brien.
Just to give us some context, how does appropriations work? You're drawing from both ACCD and FBR.
So the funding for the program?
Yeah, and what's sort of your budget, say, for the next fiscal year?
Well, it's this funding source has sort of a uncertain funding future. We to date have received year over year of one-time state general fund allocations. So originally, you can see up on the screen here, originally we got $100,000. We granted that to 2 communities as sort of pilots for this program. That worked so well that we got $200,000 the following year. And then during the pandemic, the governor really saw the value of this program and its value to helping communities recover their economies and allocated $5 million. We were able to get another allocation of $5 million during for fiscal year 2023. And right now we're working on structuring that program and getting a timeline out to launch that program. So
that's your grant funding. How much just to
lights on it? For me, well, so we have federal funding that supports my position and like another temp position. And we get $366,000-ish a year. It's sort of year over year. It's not something we can necessarily depend on, but the future of that funding is looking very promising right now. So that helps keep the lights on, so to say, and doesn't just go to my position. It goes towards we're working with partners to fund things that are really important to growing their capacity and projects in partnership with them. We, Becca, you might get to this, but one example is we worked with the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance after the last round of the grant program, and they brought in Vermont Sports Magazine, and we did 2 features on the communities that received Vorik community grants. And they talked about, the outdoor recreation resources in their communities. They talked about the grant, what they were trying to achieve. And they were published in May and September of last year and are really great informational resources.
So the federal sources from what?
So the federal dollars allowed VOBA to do the work with Vermont Sports Magazine to create those articles.
But I was thinking of your funding.
Oh, my funding.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Comes from what, federal source? Just-
Oh, the Northern Borders Regional Commission.
Oh,
Sorry.
I think it's helpful, just for the record, I'm Becca Washburn. I'm the Director of Lands Administration and Recreation and the Chair of VOREC, following in Commissioner Snyder's footsteps. And I think what is so impressive and exciting about the Northern Borders Regional Commission funding, the NBRC funding that supports this whole initiative is it was a commitment on the part of that organization to say, we want the northern forests or the areas in New England to set up these offices of outdoor recreation. And we're willing to create seed funding specifically to add capacity to those states so that they could establish this. I think they had seen Vermont working to establish what we had created through a lot of sweat equity from Commissioner Snyder and FPR staff and ACCD staff, and realized the opportunity to leverage that impact. So we originally got 3 years of funding and are looking at likely having additional commitments of funding that allow us to continue this.
Thanks, Becca.
Yeah, it's fun. We have the spend around town money and the grant funding that's made available to us as one-time funding. One thing I just want to make sure is well understood. I think Representative Torrey may have said this earlier this week when she was testifying, introducing the bill 467. The 100,000 that's represented in 2019 and then 100,000 of 2020s is in FPR's base budget. We put $100,000 in the base budget as a really modest way of saying, we want to continue to make investments in communities. In 2020, the legislature matched that, said, this is amazing. I can't believe the impact in Randolph and Newport that we're seeing from these grant dollars. Let's match that. And then, as Jackie explained, when the pandemic was upon us and the need to make those investments happen, that's when you see that big scale up. We continue to maintain 100,000 in FPR's budget, but that will obviously look a little bit different after having been able to put $5 million on the ground in the state on a couple of years.
So that 100,000 came from where exactly?
General fund.
Of state money?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not part of the 300-some thousand that you get from the feds?
That's separate.
Okay.
And I'll just add about the Northern Border Regional Commission that I know Commissioner Josh Hanford isn't here today, but that federal funding is received by the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and then allocated to the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. So just to elaborate on that sort of partnership that FPR and ACCD have.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, Becca and Jackie, to jump from 200,000 2020 to, I don't know, 20 times, 10 times.
Yeah.
Did any of that come from that Northern Borders? Was any of that federal money? That was all the governor and the saying, boy, the return on investment is really incredible.
You might recall last session, there was a lot of talk about how much general fund surplus was available to be thinking big and making revolutionary impacts with. At times throughout the session, there was a possibility that this $5 million could be ARPA funding or it could be general fund. And Commissioner Snyder made the case that in order to really provide this to the broadest range of communities, state funding is much easier to work with than federal funding. And our recommendation was, if possible, we would love to see the VOREC program funded with general fund dollars to maximize the ability for communities to leverage that. So that's what we ended up seeing, was that it was general fund surplus that was being used because of the ARPA money that came in. So it actually came out of the ARPA bill, made it a little confusing for us at the beginning.
It was pulled out of the ARPA bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In 2021, there's a, you skipped there was no base funding even that year?
Becky, you might be able, this was before I was hired and came on board. I came on board in 2021 when the federal funding became available. But I'm assuming that was a result of the pandemic and some other needs that the department had, but do you have any?
I think we ended up not lifting up a grant round that year. We were designing what would end up being the $5 million program. Where I thought you were going, Representative Lipsky, was just what it took our department to be able to stand up a program that had the sort of scaffolding in place to support 200,000 in grant making to suddenly be making grants on the order of $5 million. We put a lot of time and effort into making sure we were doing that right.
Representative O'Brien.
Just looking up the Northern Border Regional Commission, it's interesting, it says that it's this federal state partnership for economic and community development within the most distressed counties of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, and Vermont, every county is in it. So what's the definition of most distressed?
I mean, so I don't know a lot about the background of like how Northern Border Regional Commission decides where they're who's within that group. I could do a little bit more digging to find that out if it's of further interest. But I know that it is to the benefit of Vermont that our whole state is within this region, because we don't have to think about, Maine and New Hampshire. They have to think about where are they putting this funding, and we get to use it to work statewide, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And the other really cool piece of that collaboration is that we get to work with Maine and New Hampshire on a lot of overlapping projects and interests to this region.
The Northwoods Canoe Trail.
The Northern Forest Canoe Trail.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So thinking about those sort of outdoor recreation opportunities that cross state lines, because as you know, the natural world doesn't see state boundaries. So pretty neat.
I do remember after the VORAC initiative got started, the change in the Northern Borders Regional Commission's boundaries occurred. I want to say it was 2019 even. It did used to sort of mirror the Northern Forest and was only the northern counties, and they recently made that change. But like you said, Jackie, we could look into that and get a better understanding of what the catalyst for that change was.
It's a comment, and it may be helpful to Representative O'Brien and the whole committee. In 1991, there was a very famous book written by two forest ecologists and foresters called The Northern Forest. And it was really a 150-year history of this unique ecosystem that stretched through northern New York, Adirondacks, northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and Maine. And it's not a happy story of land use or economics. So not only is it a distinct ecological biome or forest type that is trans-frontier or trans-border, but the same pattern of sort of obsolescence and transitioning. This Northern Border Commission really grew out of the observation that in order to lift that region economically and to transition out of the pulp mills for closing. So it's very much related to that history. It's really fascinating. Ober and Dobbs were the two authors of that. It's a great.
You're still presenting.
Yes.
Okay.
But these questions are all really good, and I think we
I've
covered
got a bunch,
lot.
but I want you to finish.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, perfect. I'm glad you have a lot of questions. So I do, that covered the grant program and the things that I wanted to reflect to you about, we've kind of received this one-time state general funds year over year. It got really big during the pandemic, and we were able to increase our granting capacity. which is really great. And we're working on launching the next round of the program now. And if that's of interest at some point in learning about in more detail, we're happy to. I'd love to bring some grant recipients and to chat with you about the impacts that program has made for them. But I do want to give Becca the opportunity to say a few words. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her.
Super, thank you. I'm going to slide in here. Thanks. Excellent. So as I mentioned, taking over for Commissioner Snyder as chair, big shoes to fill, really exciting opportunity. Had the benefit of being around for the creation of VORIC. I was just beginning my tenure with the department when the initiative was established, and I've had the opportunity to sort of help build the accomplishments and the ideas that Jackie was presenting on. And one of the things that I think is most interesting and really something to be proud of is how well the Vermont model represents that collective impact network that Jackie described. Really, the concept is one that is really intended to be able to solve complex social issues. And while you might not identify outdoor recreation as a complex social issue, the fact that in Vermont, it pretty much touches everything. Outdoor recreation, being outdoors, being connected with nature, is just inherently part of what it means to be here in Vermont. I was thinking about what I wanted to share as far as what this means to me and what the outdoor recreation economy looks like from my standpoint. And there are a lot of really obvious things that we could be thinking about. Ski areas, fabulous trail networks, the ability to walk out your door and hit a rail trail. Those are all really obvious and great. But I think I like to take it a little bit further and think about living in central Vermont, what my family benefits from having access to services that are there because there's world-class mountain biking. There's great access to ski resorts. So those physical therapists, those dentists, all of the different services that attract new populations to come to different communities, that make for a really vibrant downtown, that attract businesses like The Alchemist. Outdoor recreation is in some ways behind that. So I think here in Vermont, I'm really excited to consider how well we've been able to build what is well understood and sort of recognized as a valuable underpinning of what Vermont is and what it represents for folks. Living in Waterbury at Tropical Storm Irene and thinking about how core outdoor recreation became to our recovery in that community because all of the state workers left the Waterbury complex, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters was leaving. We decided it was really important for our community to look at wayfinding and helping visitors better access Camel's Hump, Little River State Park, Waterbury Reservoir, the mountain biking at Perry Hill. And it took a tropical storm for us to really see that this is a resilient factor in our economy versus some of these other businesses that are more transient. So just a couple of personal examples of how I see being part of VOREC and helping to advance what it means is really special to me. The set of committee members that you see here, again, I think help support what is expected of a collective impact network where you have a common agenda, you're attempting to solve a complex problem. In this case, the complex problem that we're attempting is what does it mean to advance outdoor recreation responsibly in Vermont? I think we've all maybe heard news clips on Vermont Public, even our very own Vice Chair, Commissioner Hanford, talking about the need for housing and where are we going to find the land base to support new housing. These are the kinds of issues that are so relevant to what VOREC represents and being able to bring together these different stakeholders to say, we need conserved land. We need world-class recreational assets. We need businesses that can thrive in downtowns. And we need housing for those business owners and their employees. So what does it look like for us to overcome these really complex issues that if we were just working together in FPR to try and solve, we wouldn't really make it very far. So here's this amazing network. I think one of the things that is also really exciting and really largely due to the vision of our governor and Commissioner Snyder, is this idea of having VOREC situated at the nexus between Forest Parks and Recreation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. FPR is all about caring for the land that the recreational resources are built upon and making sure that everybody, no matter who you are, where you live, what you look like, have access to that land to be able to enjoy it the way that you want to. That's what FPR is all about. Agency of Commerce and Community Development has just an amazing complement. They're thinking about tourism and marketing, telling the story of what it means to be part of Vermont's sense of place, economic development, vibrant downtowns, healthy communities, all of these things that when we walk downtown in Montpelier, or an example that I'll give later, the town of Randolph, these are places that have benefited from recognizing that outdoor recreation plays an important role in their brand. And we've brought these individuals together through the vision of the governor in establishing this initiative back in 2017, and owe a lot of gratitude to these individuals. They're all giving their time as volunteers, completely committed to that common agenda of advancing outdoor recreation and the outdoor recreation economy here in Vermont. And I couldn't be more proud of the people that have put in so much time and effort. There's folks from the stewardship community, the Trails and Greenways Council, the Outdoor Business Alliance, other business members. It's really pretty exciting to see the geographic distribution of the steering committee and the different sectors of the outdoor rec economy that they represent. Any questions on how this composition came about? The people and the role that they play, the organizations they represent, were very deliberately selected by the governor. He saw the need for this to have the full spectrum of representation. And in fact, whenever there are vacancies, as there have been since 2017, he plays a pretty key role in helping us identify who those successors should be. So a really carefully curated group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just for sake of my understanding, organizationally, your chair, Becca, of VOREC,
Yes.
is the committee.
The steering committee. Yeah, so I act as the program manager for the program.
Yeah.
And then a key part. So if you think about like our collective impact network and the backbone of that network, there's the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, there's the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and then there's really the steering committee, which is the reflection of those diverse partnerships that we have.
Yeah.
And so Becca sits as the chair on the steering committee, and Commissioner Josh Hanford is the vice chair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a staff member, pay for Jackie comes from our department, but she's technically a staff person for both ACCD and Parks and Recreation. So relatively unique model, but one that we felt was really important to sort of walk the walk of, if the outdoor recreation economy is this nexus between these two entities in state government, then we want to actually deliver on that. And having a staff person come in and be able to be part of each of those state agencies was really important to reflect that. Excellent. You've heard a lot from Nick Bennett. He's the chair of the Trails and Greenways Council and co-chair of the Trails and Greenways Council, and also the executive director of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. Just such a terrific organization that we've been sort of in lockstep with for decades at this point. And I think one of the things that is really interesting and practical to think about when we consider what VOREC is comprised of is the Trails and Greenways Council is this attempt to be a coalition and representation of all the different types of recreation organizations that support the 8,000 miles of trails in our state on private and public land. So we're members of the Trails and Greenways Council. So is the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association and the Stowe Trails Partnership. There's just a really wide range of entities that are represented, including municipalities. I really shouldn't give short shrift to the municipalities that have begun to host really amazing recreation resources like Katy Hill. So there are 2 seats on VOREC from the Trails and Greenways Council, motorized and non-motorized. Danny Hale and Abby Long. Abby is the executive director of the Kingdom Trails Association. So really wanting to make sure that that representation was solid across the different types of outdoor recreation we support here in Vermont.
Are bicycles considered motored?
They're not.
Oh, okay.
They're called mechanized in the conservation world. Great question. One of the ways that we've been using the Northern Borders Regional Committee Commission funding is this idea of being able to support the creation of these coalitions or these important affinity organizations. The Trails and Greenways Council is one. Jackie mentioned the Outdoor Business Alliance. This was an outcome early on in VOREC's initiative to identify strategies and actions that would successfully advance outdoor recreation in Vermont. Each of these entities, hopefully soon, VTGC, the Trails and Greenways Council, will be a recipient of a grant from our department to help support that part-time position that Nick was mentioning earlier this week. They're attempting to bring some staff capacity in the door while we look for a more sustainable model for staffing such a critical coalition of organizations. So the Northern Borders Regional Commission funding, not only is it supporting the sort of backbone of VOREC in the agencies that it represents in the steering committee, but it's also helping put surge of organizational capacity funding into these really important partners. So that's an exciting thing to be able to celebrate has happened. You mentioned a couple of the exciting things that VOBA has done.
Yeah, well, and VOBA has also been a recipient of some of that funding originally to sort of seed their efforts and help them get off the ground, which was really important, I know, to building their network and holding networking opportunities for outdoor businesses. More recently, we've been working with them on things like those articles I mentioned. And we're also looking and hopefully going through, we're talking with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development about some additional funding to help them do some strategic planning, think about what are the long-term goals for outdoor businesses in Vermont. What does that look like? Because they really have become that central space for outdoor businesses. So we're hopeful that we'll get that through.
Mm-hmm. They've been a great incubator for ideas around workforce development. What does it mean to provide technical resources to people that are wanting to start up new businesses here in Vermont? So it's just been amazing to see the very targeted technical assistance that they can provide specifically to the outdoor recreation community. Think about during the pandemic when we all were out riding our bicycles and there were no bike mechanics at any of our local shops. VOBA really honed in on what does it mean to create the development stream, like talking with schools, high schools, universities about what it looks like to develop a curriculum that would help create that kind of, create an interest in that sort of job and attracting more folks being interested in taking part in that work. So some really great examples of the ways that we've been able to leverage this since we started with VOREC. Some of the original idea was to have witnesses come in from around the state and be able to share with you some of the amazing examples of these investments. The city of Newport was one of the first grant recipients. When we first made grants out, we were looking to create a model outdoor recreation friendly community. We picked Newport and Randolph. Newport worked with Vermont Land Trust on the Bluffside Farm Conservation Project and used VOREC funding to create this successful boardwalk that connects Prouty Beach with Bluffside Farm, where Youth Conservation Corps members are farming and providing food to all sorts of different people in the region. It's very close to the hospital, so there are programs affiliated with the hospital that take place in this location. It connects, or at least it's intended to connect if it doesn't already, an international sort of rail trail bike system. So just the way we were able to hit a line drive with our very first set of grants as far as being able to demonstrate what a city can do with targeted investments in the areas of those 5 VOREC pillars that Jackie mentioned. Newport said, we need connectivity, we need revitalization in our downtown, and we need to make sure that every member of the city has access to this beautiful lakefront. And we made sure that we had the funding available to hit those desired outcomes, and they've been celebrating it ever since. So really great example. I love this project.
And that just opened last summer, I believe, if none of you have been up there recently.
It's really terrific. The high school is really close by too, and it allows high school students to travel either on bikes or by walking rather than having to travel on the road. So this really serves a lot of purposes. Pretty exciting project. The other one that we love to talk about is in the town of Randolph, taking sort of what VOREC intends to make meaningful impact in and look at the other side. So we just talked about a recreational asset development. In this case, coupled with some of those trail developments in the town of Randolph, will also help to rehabilitate a downtown structure that served as an incubator for a new business. So there's a bike shop in this space now, and VOREC funding was used to help rehab this structure so that it could become a viable business space in the downtown. It also has a ton of resources for people visiting that want to get to know what sort of recreational opportunities there are in town. Great 3D map. I think they also used funding to help support a youth mountain bike team. So the breadth of impact, I think, that the town of Randolph has seen from this investment is amazing. And they've come back and are actually part of a successor grant that we're providing to them, helping with some master planning with the Velomont Trail, which maybe you've heard about or not, but you will likely be hearing, end-to-end trail that the town of Randolph's really interested in being part of. So some exciting projects in all different counties of the state. This one I mentioned to Representative Lipsky earlier this week. There was a CBS News clip. I hope that the link is live in this slide deck so that you have the opportunity to find this and watch the clip about this program. So the Community Sailing Center situated in Burlington, the interview with the journalist that did this piece said that about 6 out of 500 students to this community sailing center were non-white when they first started. 6 out of 500. And they're on target right now in the next couple of years to get to 25%. 25% of their students will be non-white. That's an amazing pivot, amazing shift. So I encourage you to follow that link, watch the program, have a tissue ready because it's a real tearjerker. But it's just amazing to see the impact that this has had. And I love the story you shared with me, Jackie, about a conversation with Owen Milne, who's the executive director, said that he really persuaded the city of Burlington to pursue this, saying, and this was when the grants were only available to municipalities, and said, we have this really great idea and we think it's going to fit with VOREC's pillars and it's going to make Burlington stand out on the map. And he couldn't have been more right. This is now a national model for how to create sailing opportunities and expand the access and really debunk the reputation this has as being a pretty elite sport. Mm-hmm. So just an exciting story to see taking place with pretty modest investment and a very quick impact, quick turnaround. So exciting.
Yeah.
I think that's it for me. You're just going to share where we're headed.
Yeah, I wanted, before we do that, any other questions about anything Becca shared or?
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, so actually this is really exciting and it's more expanded than I thought it would be. The fact that, there's an inclusivity that you're bringing here. So I'm from the Northeast Kingdom and we do have Kingdom Trails and what your work in Newport and was happy to see Laura Dolgan's quote there.
Yeah.
One of the things we're struggling with though, as a underserved community is seeing the expenditure of tax dollars and then the local population not feeling like the value of that is returning to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what you're kind of working to remedy.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, this amount of money and then the additional 3 million, it's a lot of money. I mean, we've been asked for, you know, by various groups for different amounts, and this is not, you know, insubstantial. And after the day before yesterday, after you all left, there was a conversation about, well, that's a lot of money. And then, you know, a talk about, well, how it's seen in the Northeast Kingdom, in rural communities. You know, oh, here are these people coming from out of state, you know, taking up the roads, and they're not delivering anything in return. They're taking, not bringing back. How can we maximize the return on investment here for our local, you know, rural communities? That's the question.
Yeah, and I see what you're talking about, and we hear from communities all the time about, you know, the impacts that they're starting to experience, or, you know, those challenges that might come with outdoor, and Vermont's not alone in that. I mean, this is happening across the country, in states that are much bigger than Vermont too, like Colorado. And you kind of get that, you know, you feel that tension, and those are exactly where VOREC as a program wants to lean in and help communities with these challenges, the outdoor recreation community and Vermonters with, you know, how are we integrating this in a sustainable way and building a strong structure for outdoor recreation that doesn't place that kind of impact on communities. I think when we're thinking about, you know, investing in community, I think the return is the health and wellness benefits that investing in recreation resources in small towns has, you know, and just access to information, really. I think that's where we've been seeing a really big impact for folks, is investing in wayfinding and signage and centralizing that information. So people living there have an opportunity to know what the recreation resources in their areas are. That has an immediate impact on health and wellness. Which goes beyond just outdoor recreation. It goes towards the health of our of Vermonters.
A couple other pieces I would add too. I think I heard Representative Torre earlier this week speaking to, you know, from her point of view in the Mad River Valley, she was part of a community that was very ready to implement a concept around outdoor recreation. But in other parts of the state, maybe the ideas are still germinating. Maybe you know, Danby's still trying to figure out what's the outdoor recreation brand or you know, tagline that we want for us. We've seen the towns along the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail start exploring that too. So I think one of the things that's really useful and unique about what the VOREC community grants do is they're intended to be incredibly broad, because the outdoor recreation economy is so broad that each and every community can define what does it look like for us to support outdoor recreation. So that idea germination is happening with those residents in mind, thinking, what do we want it to look like? It might not be a Kingdom Trails. It might not be a Lamoille Valley Rail Trail-like experience, but what is that particular experience that that community wants? And then the other thing that we're both doing through the grant making and in what Jackie will describe as sort of where we're headed is doing a better job of helping communities track data. So a couple of grant recipients have actually brought on consultants to say, okay, they've invested in their outdoor rec economy. What's it done? What does it look like? Are we seeing a return on our investment? So we have a couple of examples of communities that have done that. I think Randolph is one of them. Yeah. And our goal is with a sustainable source of funding for VOREC, what does it look like for us to build a data tracking system that different communities would be able to deploy on their own to be able to measure the impact of outdoor recreation there. So a couple of different ways that I think VOREC in particular can be mindful of what you describe and wanting to make sure that we're not creating cookie cutter East Berks all over the state, because that's not what everybody wants and that's not what Vermont needs. Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Cool. All right.
Representative O'Brien?
Have you done any tracking on, following upon Dave's question of the sort of outdoor recreators, how many are coming from out of state versus in-state across sort of all these things, like, you know, skiers, hunters?
I would say there is data out there. I do know that the Vermont Department of Marketing and Tourism does some tracking of people coming into the state. It's not really specific to a recreation source. And when you start to really dig into like national numbers and how they're tracked, they don't align quite in the way that we want to capture that information. So that really is an area of need that we're looking at for, you know, how do we do this better in Vermont? How do we set up a data tracking system that allows us to understand that better? But unfortunately, there's not great numbers out there yet.
And not an aggregation, but if you spoke with the ski industry, Molly Mahar would be able to share, you know, generally what our ski areas are seeing as distribution of the types of people visiting. Kingdom Trails has that data for their particular trail network. So on an individual basis, some are doing a really good job. Mostly those that rely really depend upon people coming in from out of state. Yeah.
But we don't have like a central spot for it yet.
So I think you're maybe ready to wrap up.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead and go to the next steps or what's next?
Yeah. So let's talk about what's next, because I think it's really exciting. We are a program that's been around for 5 years now. And in the grand scheme of things, that's relatively young. You know, we've just been getting our feet underneath us, understanding what this economy is and who our partners are. And looking into the future, we have an action plan that was created in 2018, right after the program was established through the executive order. But there's a real need now that we've grown up a little bit to go back and really work with those partners on, like, what is this North Star for developing and strengthening the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont? What are we working towards? And what are our priorities to get there? And more importantly, how are we working on those together to accomplish this? So really developing a roadmap for, how we see this outdoor recreation economy thing looking in Vermont is something we see as a next step, and that we're actively working on right now to move forward. Identifying emerging complex issues and defining bottlenecks and gaps. So you were kind of getting at this with your question earlier around, communities and not seeing the return on investment. We really, as a program, want to make space to lean into those kind of sticky issues and start to understand them better and think about what are those recommendations to move forward on those things, make improvements. VOREC is we see it as a very good place to have that happen because it is a multi-stakeholder group. We have the steering committee, we have these partnerships we're developing, and I think we see this as a really big opportunity to lean in. We just talked about data tracking. I won't elaborate on that, but there is a need, and we are wanting to find a way to build that centralized space for understanding what are the metrics, what are the data around how outdoor recreation benefits communities. And then, the grant program, like I said, we've received these year-over-year one-time funding allocations. How do we help people plan for outdoor recreation and plan ahead by providing a sustainable funding source for them, something that's reliable, that they can look into the future and say, okay, I'm here now, I have this vision, I'm not ready to apply to implement this project yet, but the funding will be there when I'm ready. And right now, the grant program is doing a lot of great things, but being able to look into the future and say it's going to be there 5 years from now is not one of those things we can say at this time. So a little bit of I don't know if you have anything else to add, Becca, but I think that's where we see the program heading as we continue to grow up and gain momentum, especially with our partnerships.
Yeah, I think I think this lays a really good groundwork for me being able to come in next week and talk more specifically about how H467 and the bills that it represents, what it's building on with what we shared with you today. So we'll look forward to that. I was paying close attention to the questions that you were asking earlier this week and want to make sure that I have the opportunity to really build on this.
Good, thanks. Yeah, I think it's been helpful. And just, unless anybody needs to rush out, we maybe have a few more questions, and do you need to rush out? It's noon. So, Representative Lipsky.
Becca, after you left the other day, it was offline chatting just about the excitement, but some of the challenges, and I think this is sort of a comment or request to you because I'm a co-sponsor of this bill.
Yes.
Particularly in the Northeast, King, there are some of the more rural communities that don't have a draw like the Valley or Waterbury, where there are breweries and distilleries, or Stowe and the obvious, places. But in Danville, and it takes something, it's a bigger challenge for those communities to instantly turn this into even the most modest economic driver without creating resentment that, these Quebec plates come into town, leave, and then, or the whatever. So anything you can think of that focuses on those most vulnerable or most in need communities will help us advance the goals and frankly the funding.
Yeah.
So those are the communities that I know, that I worry about most, and those representatives. Things like, and I know Commissioner Snyder was big on these. Was there a Brandon Gap, like winter backcountry ski?
Yes.
That all of a sudden went from just this little idea where a dozen people were sort of sneaking these things, and now it's sort of known all over the state or the Northeast, and in an area that there was none of this. So those sort of things.
I think one of the things that I can plan to do is maybe share a little bit more detail on the different ways that some of the rural communities have decided to use these dollars. Brighton is an example off the top of my head that I could maybe brush up on some of the outcomes from these grants, but Brighton was looking at we want better access to the lake, so we're going to put in a dock. We want to have better trailhead signage around snow machine parking areas. The Northern Forest Canoe Trail had a couple of portages that they wanted to better promote. So I think maybe one of the ways that I could help this committee sort of be thinking about how VOREC does have the potential to have an impact for those communities that aren't the East Berks or the Danvilles, help imagine what that looks like. I can do that. I think the other thing too is maybe giving space for this committee to have a little bit of a conversation about when you think about what the outdoor recreation economy is, as Jackie described it, and is that a general store being able to stay in business?
Right.
Is it having a pediatrician come to town because they want to live there, and suddenly you have businesses that can move there because there's a pediatrician close by? Those are the kind of things that we think beyond, a bike retailer. Waterbury can now support 2 bike retailers. They never had one before. I think if we take the time to sort of explore what that actually looks like in a community, we might begin to be able to visualize that economic success a little more effectively than we can when we say, oh, well, not everybody wants to be Waterbury or not everybody wants to be Stowe. Yeah, it's really helpful.
I just wanted to add, I heard you mention Danville, and they did receive a grant in the last round of our grant program and are working on some really great investments into their community, into the train station that's located along the I'm pretty sure the DNH, sorry if I'm
Memorial
getting
Valley.
Memorial Valley Rail Trail, sorry. And turning that into a really valuable space for the community, but also people who would be riding by on the trail and maybe wanting a little more information about the town. So,
Representative
yes, and I heard,
Powell,
Yeah.
and I think you were at when we came last year.
And I think it's like there's great things happening and there's been a lot of work to get there. There's this issue that we deal with, like, and especially in Danville's circumstance, with the complexity of, like, because the original intent is obviously to use that building, which used to be the recycling center, rehab that to bring people off the rail trail and then bring them into town.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with this issue of how do we get them, it's not a very long distance, but to get them in, we've got this really narrow road with houses right there and no sidewalk. And like, how do we, and so we had Du Bois and King come in and do a study on bike paths, or like trying to make a single, and the point I was bringing up yesterday was, we designed this, they designed this, a 1-lane road with bike, like it changed, like it was an experiment to see. And like, there was just tons of people in the community that were like, this is ridiculous, like it's such a pain, like, and this is just all for the bikes and, we're trying to drive on this road and nobody knows what to do. And like, there's this education piece and like the intent is so good. And I think it's this challenge of education and the complexity, like there's the piece, the school is there and the ball fields are a ways away and we're trying to figure out how to get kids to the ball fields with no sidewalk, and can we incorporate that piece in too and have a trail, and then there's a parking issue because the recycling center is across from the fire department and there's the people parking in the fire department and blocking and it's just like it gets to these and it's like how do we get people in that can help plan and educate and not use up all the money to actually implement something. And so it just opens up these, and I'm not at all like trying to be discouraging at all, but it's just the things on our end.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I think you're not, like the town of Danville in deciding to invest in this way in outdoor recreation isn't alone in experiencing that kind of, oh wait, now there are these things that are connected to this. And I think one of the things that's exactly what we're learning as a young grant program as well. And trying to think about how do we set up those pathways to success so that the town of Danville doesn't get a grant and run into all of these questions and then is just sort of on their own to figure it out. So.
Yeah, and I think it's not just a matter of education, because sometimes the people in these small reaches of our state feel like they're being told, oh, this is going to be good for you. Here's the data. And then they feel deceived when it isn't the way that they imagine it would be good for them, right? So, I mean, I think it's actually delivering, right? Not just telling them, but, and far too often, like, okay, maybe 1 or 2 businesses are improved or set up because of this, but it's not felt amongst the whole community necessarily. And
some of the ways that we've seen communities come to us with a request for funding and have some pretty well-developed concepts has been participation in the Council on Rural Development's community visits. And I don't know if any of your communities have been able to benefit from that. But we're finding that like creating space for that dialogue, the ones that I've participated in, we're sitting in basements of churches or we're at libraries, we're in spaces where people feel comfortable convening and sharing thoughts and ideas with their neighbors. And the ideas that emerge, the categories of ideas are coming from those people and from those conversations. So I think, as Jackie said, what we're trying to do with this current fiscal year's worth of funding is repurpose the program, stand it back up so that it creates lots of on-ramps for communities that might be just beginning to think about what's right for their community, or could be at a place where they're like, we just need that closing $100,000 and then we're off to the races. So we really want to be able to provide that support to every community wherever they are on the spectrum of like concept to implementation.
I'm going to ask this question, although I hesitate because the answer probably isn't a short one.
Everybody's stomachs are growling.
Yeah. So, but I'll ask it and then we can discuss it another time perhaps. But I'm wondering when the program was set up, since it was recently enough that there's still some, institutional memory, if not direct memory, whether there was conversation about, I'm imagining there was conversation about how the outcomes would be measured.
Yes.
And then how down the road, somebody might go back, you or us, and say, oh yeah, this worked. And, beyond looking at pictures, which are great, and describing it, but how do we know that, yes, this was a good choice of a project, or what are we measuring it against? So if the answer is indeed yes, we can save that conversation for another time, because I think it would be helpful for us to know what you're thinking.
I think that would be helpful. And yes, I think there's a lot more that we could say and get into about the grant program. I think, bring some folks who have benefited from the grant program would also be maybe really valuable for you to hear from the people on the ground, and maybe bringing some additional detail back. The grant program, I'll just leave you with the grant program is relatively young. So we grant for 2-year project cycles. So we say 2 field seasons. And our first round of recipients, Randolph and Newport, really just finished their project. So the amount of actual data we have right now isn't probably what you want, but
it's being generated.
Yeah, it's being generated.
Yeah. The interesting thing too is we thought that pilot was really intended to create a couple of models that they would provide to us. What are the tools that you developed? Give us the recipe book for how you managed to do this successfully in your community. And what we will then do is share these outcomes, these products with other communities that might have similar interests. So I think it's fair to say that our vision for what that first $100,000 was intended to accomplish has shifted tremendously with just what the outpouring of support and desire for that money, what that represented over the last couple of years. So as Jackie said, we can talk a little bit more about the origin story of this grant program and how that the goals have shifted and how we're attempting to sort of keep up with that goal of being able to track metrics.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
So, why don't we stop there then for the afternoon and, we're done for the day here in the committee. And